Welcome to the Organic Wine Podcast. I'm Adam Huss, coming to you from Los Angeles, California. Thanks so much for listening. The sponsor for this episode is Catavino Tours. Catavino Tours provides luxury travel, wine, and food tours in Portugal and Spain, and they are guided by a desire to reduce the ecological impact that travel can have by reducing waste, encouraging fewer and more meaningful trips, and by using well-vetted carbon offsets. They are currently booking at catavinotours.com/OWP for Organic Wine Podcast for a fall sustainable and natural wine harvest tour. If you're considering a wine tour in Portugal and Spain and want to have that experience be more meaningful and conducted by a company who is thoughtful about their ecological impact, check out Catavino Tours by going to catavinotours.com/OWP. That's CATAVINO tours.com/OWP for Organic Wine Podcast. And your tour will not only benefit you, but this podcast as well. I'll list that link in the show notes. Thank you for being thoughtful about your travel. My guest for this episode is Haley Brown, the Executive Director of Wine Growers Nova Scotia, and this is a very special episode for multiple reasons. First, believe it or not, this is the first episode of the Organic Wine Podcast about a specific region and wine that is made outside the borders of the United States. I know those of you not from the U.S. are probably thinking it's about time, and you're not wrong. But I've been really intentional about this focus. I think change always starts locally, and also there's a lot I think we need to change in the U.S. But I'm really excited to crack that international seal with Nova Scotia because they are doing something unique and brilliant with Tidal Bay wine. If this isn't your first episode of the Organic Wine Podcast, you probably know that I want to bring an end to varietal labeling of wines. I stopped listing grape varieties on the wines I make with my winery Centralis as of the 2021 vintage, and I've been talking about the need to do away with our varietal obsession ever since. I think it turns wine into a commodity rather than a cultural process. It inhibits change and innovation, and it forces growers to conform to market trends rather than adapt to environmental conditions. And it has resulted in, as Haley mentions, 80% of the world's wine being made from 20 varieties of grapes, all of which are actually a single species from Europe, by the way. Aside from the negative ecological effects of this global monoculture, it has also made wine incredibly boring. And then we wonder why sales are declining. But as the lone voice for how eliminating varietal labeling could benefit the entire wine industry, after a couple years of spreading this message, I found that most people receive this message with confusion at best, and at worst, I was dismissed as that crazy guy from Los Angeles, which, is fair to an extent. And as a self-critical kind of person, some pernicious doubts did begin to creep into my mind. But then, at the Vidinord conference in December, I discovered Tidal Bay. Tidal Bay is the first and only Appellation wine in North or South America. That is, it is a wine that is made, branded, and sold as a reflection of a place and culture without reliance on varietal labeling. And honestly, for the first of something, I think the Nova Scotians did something that needs no refinement. The way they have conceived of and structured Tidal Bay is brilliant. It's flexible, inclusive, rigorous, reflective of their unique culture, and ensures high quality. After you listen to this, let me know if you can think of any way to improve on this idea or why it couldn't be implemented in any region where there are growers willing to participate. A big thanks to Haley for elucidating all of the details that go into Tidal Bay wine, and a big thanks to the Nova Scotian growers who have given us this incredible and successful example, and on a personal note, have made me feel a little bit validated. Thank you, and enjoy. Hi, Haley. Welcome. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you, Adam, for the invite. I'm very excited to talk about Nova Scotia and our wine, so I appreciate the invite.
Yes, I am. I know. So I have talked to some international folks, but I don't think I've talked to anybody outside of the US about outside of the US wine. So
Yeah.
this might be a first for me in that sense, which is exciting. But also, I think what you have going on in Nova Scotia is very exciting, and I can't wait to talk about Tidal Bay and the sort of uniqueness of that and why that is kind of special to me, especially.
Yeah.
But but let's start with, what's your story? How did you get into all this? You're the executive director of Wine Growers Nova Scotia. But
Yeah.
how did you end up doing that and being there?
Yeah, so I actually don't have a wine background. I've worked in, tourism. I've, stakeholder relations. I was a former press secretary, and also sort of in tech as well. But I tend to be a bit of a jack of all trades. And moving to Nova Scotia back in 2019, this opportunity came up. And I've been very fortunate in my life that I've lived in Australia, I've lived in Europe, and I've always loved and enjoyed a glass of wine. And when this opportunity came up, sort of my marketing, stakeholder relations, my government relations, sort of past experience was very relevant to what they needed. Coming across as even as a Canadian, I didn't even know Nova Scotia had a wine region, and when I
Mm.
came and discovered it myself as a Canadian, I really saw how special it was. And it's the terroir, it's the wine, it's the people. Nova Scotia is a really special place in Canada, and really, really proud. I'm of they do all the work. This is their craft, but I'm the lucky one that gets to shine a spotlight on it, and really proud of that.
Yeah, I feel that. I know what you're talking about, and
Yeah.
I love that as well. And it sounds like, I've gotten to know a little bit about Nova Scotia over the past month or so, and I mean, it sounds like a pretty incredible place. It sounds like you probably have a pretty easy job promoting its specialness. Do you want to talk a little bit about, I mean, just a little of its history and importance in wine, the importance of its history in wine generally, but then also just the sort of unique terroir of that spot.
Yeah, so Nova Scotia is part of the Maritimes in Canada, and far eastern province, and we're small but mighty. So there's a population of 1 million people, and a lot of the wineries are located in the Annapolis Valley, and we've got wineries in Cape Breton and Bear River, coast to coast to coast in Nova Scotia, but there is a concentration in the Annapolis Valley. And it is a really special place. Over 400 years ago, when Europeans were landing on the eastern shores of North America, Nova Scotia has some of the first plantings in all of North America. Of course, those plantings no longer exist, and the current industry is relatively new. A few decades old, but it does have that vibrancy, that history, and culture. Nova Scotia is, I refer to it. It has a lot of grit. You know, with the history and the climate and everything, Nova Scotians are probably the most friendliest of Canadians, if you can believe
Oh,
that.
that's saying something. Yeah.
Even even if I had to get used to it walking down the street, people would just start up a conversation with you, and I just would have to remind myself, like, Haley, they're not trying to sell you anything. They're just genuinely like wanting to get to know you down the street, and they'll even like walk you to wherever you're going. Like, they're just beautiful people, and it's a beautiful part of Canada. And I feel like I've discovered this special place in 2019, and I think over COVID and everything, I think a real light was shone on Nova Scotia and the Maritimes as a whole. And I think more and more people are seeing why it's so special, realizing it. Yeah,
What?
and as far as the appellation, happy to speak about that too.
Yeah, I mean, before we move on, I mean, so some of the first plantings in North America, probably some of the first plantings in the Americas in general, if they're the
Yeah,
first in North America, in the early 1600s, if I
yeah,
remember from from what I've read. And
yeah.
also, I know there's a bit of a maybe some debate about this, but there were some there's a Viking history as well. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, I can't claim to be any expert, but yeah, there's been definitely different, just Nova Scotia. If you look on the map, we are really in the the middle of the ocean, and so I think it was a first landing for a lot of different regions and over the millennia.
Have you? This is totally an aside, but have you watched any of the Vikings TV shows that are out now? Like,
A few. I haven't watched. You know what I do watch? I'm a bit of a nerd, and the history of of Oak Island, and they're like there. It's a couple Americans trying to find this treasure that's like
ah,
in off of the coast of Nova Scotia, and I think even like one of your former presidents came and tried to find the treasure on this little
oh
island on
wow.
the coast, and yeah, it's actually really really quite interesting. So yeah, and what they're finding is like I think the Portuguese, like all different cultures have come to the shores at some point and have made a mark on Nova Scotia.
Now you mentioned it got some attention during the pandemic. Was Nova Scotia the setting of that feature that was made about the real thing that happened where planes got stranded? Was that, or was that not? I know it was somewhere. Do you know what I'm talking about?
In 9/11,
Oh,
the
9/11. Maybe
yeah,
that's what it was.
the
Yes,
Atlantic provinces, and there's that Come From Away Broadway show. So that was
that's
Atlantic
it.
Canada, Newfoundland. But yeah,
That's
you're
Newfoundland.
kind of the
Okay.
right side of Canada. Yeah, um,
Okay, sorry. I could.
and that's it, right? As they are honestly some of the most welcoming people on this planet, and that's what they'll do. They'll open their doors, and the hospitality of Nova Scotians is second to none.
All right. Um, it's also unique in the world in terms of its climate in some very special ways related to tides there, which is really fascinating. So some of not some of the biggest tides in the world, if I am correct, right? The biggest tidal change from high to low tide.
Yeah, so that is Nova Scotia, and I think that adds to the terroir of our wine. But yeah, we absolutely do have some of the world's highest tides, and we feel like that adds to the terroir and our wine. So um, yeah, again, it's a pretty special place, and if you ever want to come out with your family or anything like that, I'm happy to play host and show you around. But yeah, it's pretty cool. There's on every coastline, there's something unique and special. There's Cape Breton, and then yeah, you can't say enough about it.
And yeah, I mean, I've heard these tides described as bellows for the vineyards, where this huge outflow and inflow daily creates this. Obviously, like there's a maritime effect. It's an island, and it's getting all of that anyway. But this is makes it an even more extreme sort of version of that, where you just have this pulse of the ocean and the
Yeah.
tides that really pull in air and push in and pull out air. It, has that, what does that do? Yeah, I mean, what do you hear the wine growers talk about in terms of how that impacts what they're doing?
Yeah, again, I think the Bay of Fundy, it's the amount of energy that it's not just wine, but you can look at energy projects and everything. The Bay of Fundy is a particular place in Canada where the energy of those tides is, we try and look at very various innovations, not just with agriculture and wine, but various innovations and of trying to harness that energy. And I absolutely
Yeah.
am a strong believer that energy can be harnessed in the agriculture that surrounds the Bay of Fundy.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah, I can imagine green energy by harnessing tidal energy would be a really
Yeah,
valuable thing.
Yeah, there's it's pretty phenomenal. Just looking, when you see the extreme tides go in and out, and the soil is red. It's, and a lot of the Annapolis Valley is on an ancient seabed itself. A lot of the vines are. So again, it's really neat. A really unique place. There is a gentleman by the name of Peter Gamble, that when we talk about Tidal Bay, but Peter Gamble is a gentleman that here in Canada that is a consultant, and a lot of wines across Canada, coast to coast, work with him. And he described it once for me that he was trying Chardonnays, and he would taste Chardonnays from BC, Ontario, and Nova Scotia, and he would taste them blindly, and provide his feedback back to the wineries, but he could always tell the Chardonnay from Nova Scotia, and he
Hmm.
could always tell. And it was him that said, and approached the wineries at that time to say, you know what, you've got something really special here. Your wine is unique, and we very much have focused on you know celebrating what we do well, and Tidal Bay is the result of that.
Yeah, I imagine that sea energy translates into a sort of wine energy in the glass where you feel
Exactly.
that, that all that ionized air gets absorbed by the land and the vines, and gets translated into things that
Yeah.
you can probably taste and feel in your mouth, I can imagine.
It's
And
really bright, like it's really bright and lively, like, and again, it just, the people, the climate, the tides, like it's a real reflection. When we say it's Nova Scotia in a glass, it really is. And like you, I really do believe it's all those factors that play into to what Tidal Bay is all about.
yeah, one of the things that you have in your marketing materials, and it's attributed as a quote to you, and I saw it also at Vidanord as one of the things that they said, and I wrote this down as something that I instantly latched onto. But it was, when 80% of the world's wines are made with the same 20 grapes, we choose to do something different, or we chose to be different.
Yeah.
What do you mean when you say that? Like, what is that? What is the different?
Yeah. So when we talk about Chardonnays and Pinot Noirs, like and again, this was and I'm happy to share. I don't have the article. There was an article shared with me by a lady by the name of Amy Savory here who's a sommelier here in Nova Scotia, and that was it. The article talks about how there's thousands of different grape varieties in varietals in the world, and yet 80% of the world's wines are made of the same 20 grapes. And I find it's good to be unique, and it's good to be standing in that world. And again, I love a good Chardonnay or a Pinot, but I also know, like, Nova Scotia can do those wines, but we also have embraced grapes like Lac Blanc and Seville Blanc and Vidal, and it's those grapes that have been flourishing in our climate here in Nova Scotia that we've embraced, and it's a major component of requirement to produce a Tidal Bay. And it's celebrating what we do well, and celebrating hybrids that may not have been as celebrated in the past. Although, again, even in my short time in the wine industry, the amount of requests and sort of I'm getting as far as to talk about Lackady and to is actually really, really interesting. I think there is a spotlight being shone on hybrids, and trying to have regions stand out, and Nova Scotia, have the Appellation Tidal Bay, was well before my time, but it's really very much a celebration of how we're different and how our region is different, and it's a way the region can work together. They're really quite collaborative, which I'm quite proud of. And yeah, it's celebrating what we do well.
Okay, so you've mentioned Tidal Bay now a couple times, and I
Yeah.
just want to step back and make sure that people understand why that's so important and unique. It's
Mhm.
so Tidal Bay. so there's something like 26 wineries between grapes and other fruit on Nova Scotia, licensed wineries, and they all can produce their own wine, obviously.
Yeah.
But Tidal Bay is this it's an appellation wine. It's not based on a specific winery. It's not found, it is anybody in the appellation, any winery could submit a wine and have it selected to be part of Tidal Bay, which is its own label brand. It's like, I think it's the only and first appellation wine in Canada. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'd even go so far as North America. Like we've
I would
tried,
go that far too. Yeah.
and we're looking at the South America too. But yeah, it's
Yeah.
very much sort of mirrored on the sort of the appellation system in Europe. So like Bordeaux and Burgundy and Champagne in France, or Chianti or Prosecco in Italy, and it really is a regional style wine, and it has to be 100. The grapes have to be 100% Nova Scotian, and yeah, there is a set of standards that the industry has outlined, and you have to submit them, your samples every year to a tasting panel, and further that we have just introduced sort of another layer of sort of testing and quality is we have lab testing once everything is bottled, and it is a very special wine. It's we're again very small region. We have 14 wineries that now make a Tidal Bay, and we don't have the volumes and scale that other regions do, but it really is it's really been this shining star of Nova Scotia, and it's very much getting the attraction that it deserves, and it's unique to North America for sure, and we're pretty proud of it and happy to talk about it at any time.
So it's a white wine. Let's start there too, Tidal Bay. And so I just want to talk about some of the standards to that must be met. So it's a white wine, and the majority of it, at least 51%, has to be at least one of a selection of 4 grapes, all of which are hybrids.
Mhm.
That one that you mentioned, Lacadi, is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah, Lac Blanc,
Lacadi
Saval
Blanc?
Blanc,
Sounds fun.
yeah,
Saval
Vidal,
Blanc.
yeah, and Geisenheim 318.
Um, and so I just want to know,
Mhm.
this is a little bit of a joke, but were those were those selections was title were they selected for Title Blanc because you figured nobody would know them in the market anyway, so we might as well name it something besides the variety?
No, I think it was actually like it was more of these grapes flourish in Nova Scotia, and again celebrating what we do well, and the uniqueness of Nova Scotia, and again like we absolutely our Chardonnays are sparkling, even um, some of our particular whites and our rosés are getting international attention, but this was something that we could produce, that was unique to Nova Scotia. And again, these grapes do really well in our cool climate, and why not bottle it?
That's a much better answer than what I proposed. But there are also a whole selection of at least, I don't know, 20 other, something like that. I mean, there's a lot of other grapes that could go into that, but they would have to be a minority in the blend.
Correct.
Um, and and potentially somebody could just make 100% Lacady, uh, and be entitled Bay if it met all the other requirements. Is that right, or is it required to be a blend?
Yeah, absolutely, I can.
It could be. So yeah, so it's whatever's doing well for that, for that farm in that particular niche, and or whatever the grower has, an abundance of that year potentially, because from year to year it can change too, is right? There's no requirement that you have to submit the same blend or anything like that from year to year.
Yeah, no, it can absolutely change year over year. Again, depending on the harvest and everything. You've got some wineries who sort of stick to their their sort of their formula every year, and then you've got some wineries that are trying to do something a little bit different. So again, trying to embrace the individuality of each winery, but also maintain a certain standard so that the Tidal Bay stays true to what Tidal Bay is what it's supposed to be, and it's fresh, acidic, lively. It's a great wine in a summer afternoon, especially
Low
with
alcohol too, right? Under
yeah.
11, like 9 to 11%.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Wow.
Which we are finding, seems to be, something that is so asked more forward, more often is having sort of more low alcohol wines. And so Nova Scotia, definitely the Tidal Bay wine in particular, has that lower alcohol content.
Yeah, I mean, it's really fascinating for me coming from California, where if we did anything that was 9 to 11%, it would, we would be harvesting green ripes before Veraison to get that.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
um, they're just, yeah, the heat it's a different, has a whole different impact on
Yeah,
ripeness and
for sure.
alcohol levels. But that sounds lovely. And it sounds like it goes really well with what I imagine like what would be dominantly a seafood sort of culture there where it's located.
Yeah, there's, a term before me, but what grows together goes together, and it absolutely
Yeah.
pairs exceptional with our seafood, our lobster and oysters, and it absolutely does, which is great.
Yeah. So as I've mentioned to you, I'm a huge proponent of Tidal Bay simply for the idea of what it's embodying, that it's the first of its kind here in really the Americas in general.
Hmm.
It's really setting a great example. I know it's an old idea to have an
Yeah.
Appellation wine. I mean, but for whatever reason, we abandoned the wisdom of doing that when we started marketing, specific varieties back in the 70s, and that has become the dominant thing that people sort of don't question and don't realize could be holding the wine industry back in a big way, in my opinion. And I personally, I've stopped using varieties on my labels when I make wine, but
Yeah.
it has led to some really interesting discussions and even like conflicts or just
Really?
confrontations almost with people because
Yeah.
people don't are so used to varieties that they really don't understand how to say like, oh, this is Tidal Bay, it's not Chardonnay, or it's
Yeah.
not whatever, it's not Sauvignon Blanc, it's not, and I know you could say like, oh, it's a white blend, and maybe that's the way that people get around it. But do you, in the market and marketing of Tidal Bay, have you had any, I don't know, pushback or confusion or just these kind of discussions where people are a little unsure about like, well, what's in the blend? Like where they really want to know, and you're sort of like, well, it depends. It's like it's different for every grower and every year, and here are the
Yeah. Yeah.
parameters that it could. I mean, do you like any stories of that you've heard or experienced yourself about trying to do this would be really interesting.
Yeah. So I haven't, like, again, I've only been in the industry since 2020 here, but I haven't seen that pushback. If anything, when I've reached out to US media or anything about Tidal Bay and talking about Tidal Bay, you get questioned like, what is an appellation, or what is, they need, people want an understanding of what that is. But the
Yeah.
interest, like the amount of interest we get on Tidal Bay is absolutely phenomenal. And again, I think it helps too when a region is working together. Like we are all passionate about Tidal Bay. All our winery, the 14 wineries are all talking about Tidal Bay. And so when there's a synergy in the region and the industry, I think that just like amplifies the message. And when you talk about appellation or European style wine, and you that's how you sort of explain it. And that's what I tried to do at the beginning of this call, is very much explain, it's like a Bordeaux or Burgundy or Champagne. Like when you put it in that context, I think that's what's clicking. That's how I've always explained it. And again, I think it sometimes helps that because I don't necessarily have a wine background, I make it easy for me to understand. And so if I can understand it, I hope others can. And so it's just, no, I like it's, I'm finding the exact opposite. I'm finding the amount of interest, and what we're trying to do, especially during COVID, is put out a lot of like informational videos out about it. And I've shared with you our media kit that like outlines it. We do a lot of like sort of training and sort of informational sessions because it's not a concept that especially in North America or New World wines have adopted. Um, but there is sort of a fascination around it for sure. And it was brilliant. It was a brilliant idea back in 2010 and 2011, and I'm a very lucky person that I just get to shine that spotlight on it. And they may, I would be interested to hear from sort of the winemakers and the wineries that maybe what those conversations were like 5 years ago or anything like that. But I think I think sometimes the excitement we have, maybe that translates to the people who are hearing it. And it's easy to, not that, it's easy to talk about something or sell something when you really believe like it is that special. So.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I imagine, and I imagine, yeah, it's probably got some momentum now.
Mhm.
I I I guess I wonder from the grower's perspective, it seems like a perfect combination where they don't have to do away with their own labeling in their own way, whatever they want to do, but this gives them an option to participate in an appellation wine.
Yeah.
Um, so not all of their wines have to be appellation wines. So this would be the sort of advantage over a place like Champagne or Bordeaux or whatever, where if you're there, you either follow the appellation rules or you can't be labeled. Like it's you don't know. You kind of like don't have a market for what you're doing really. Whereas it sounds like a kind of a perfect combination there for the Nova Scotia growers, where they can do both, where they can have their own bottlings of varietal labeled wines if they prefer, and as well as participate in Tidal Bay and participate that way in the Appellation wine. Have you
Yeah.
heard
Very true.
have you heard from them? Has anybody? I mean, I've watched some of the videos that you have. It seems like everybody who's participating seems to really enjoy it. Have you heard from anybody who is like, "Man, we should do all of our wines this way," or do you hear the opposite, where it's like, or do you hear? I mean, are there benefits? I imagine if you're a grape grower as well, being able to participate in an appellation wine like that gives you some flexibility with to react to vintage variation, where you might have a tough year for some of your grapes, whereas others are doing well, or you know something like that, where maybe your all of your Chardonnay this year was just hit hard with downy mildew or something like that, and really got wiped out because of some fungal pressure. And but you have these other grapes that you can always make the Tidal Bay wine with, because they're and find a blend that works because it's not as restrictive as just saying here's this one grape that we have to bottle. Have you heard any feedback like that? Any kind of feedback from it? What do you
Yeah.
hear from the growers? I should ask.
So we did have a frost in 2018 that was quite devastating. I think very similar to what France experienced most recently in the last couple years here, and it was quite, it hit us hard, and it was interesting because there had to be you know some flexibility, but uh, Tidal Bay always has been 100% Nova Scotian. And again, when you select grapes that do really well in the region, even when you're hit with frost, such as what we were hit in 2018, the wineries were still able to create a true Tidal Bay, and where they saw some of their other their Pinots or their Chardonnays that hit harder. Again, and that's sort of the sort of the brilliance of celebrating what your regions do well is that even when you do have those atypical years of storms or frosts or fires, you've got these grapes that can weather that for the most part. And so, as far as going, wineries going 100% just Tidal Bay, we haven't had that discussion, and I don't foresee that in my time. But it's for us because we're so small. We're only 14 wineries, and even as a region, we're small. And I'm talking about sort of campaign sales, but when I came on board in 2020, the sort of wine category in sort of Nova Scotia, and we saw sort of across Canada, and I'd be interested to hear what happened in the US, but we saw, sort of the wine category start to contract at the beginning of 2020. And when people were, especially at the beginning of COVID, people were starting to reach for, larger quantities of cheaper imports, and being local producers, and in the climate we are quality at the forefront. We aren't a cheap, and we nor do
Right,
we
right.
nor do we want to even and be in that category. And so we did see sort of not only the wine category contract at the beginning of 2020, and you're starting to see that in prior years, but we even saw the Nova Scotia wine category contract as people were buying those cheaper imports. And it was really interesting because the industry very much gelled, and we came together, and working with our sales channels and our partners and industry partners, we really came together, and we ended that year like with increased Tidal Bay sales of 28%. Last year we saw an increase of about 40%, and this is sort of campaign specific. And then this year we ended up increasing sales by just over 50%. And so those are immense increases of year over year increases of sales. And so we have to be mindful like of when we do look at export and marketing, we're such a small region, we're a boutique quality region, and making sure that we can fulfill on our promises. So I don't think the region is there yet. Could that be a conversation down the road? Possibly, but I don't see that. But who knows? Another thing that I think is really really quite unique to Nova Scotia, and still being new to the wine industry myself, is they're open to innovation and change. Last year we we had a number of wineries can Tidal Bay, and when you're looking about talking about trying to be environmental friendly, when you're trying to look at demographics and sort of bringing in introducing a lot of 20 somethings to wine and 30 somethings to wine. A lot of studies have shown like canned products, or individual sized containers are a real attraction. And so we decided to innovate and accept canned Tidal Bays just this last year. And what we found is that it didn't cannibalize the 750 meal sales. It actually just opened another consumer market for us. And that's why we saw, and that's why we saw that tip over of 50% of increase sales. And again, it wasn't cannibalizing, it was just introducing a new sort of container option for other sort of demographics that haven't maybe adopted sort of wine culture And so it's been really interesting, and again, really proud to be part of an industry that is willing to innovate but keep quality at the forefront. In order for us to can or wineries to can, we implemented that sort of second testing where we send the canned Tidal Bays, all canned Tidal Bays, and the bottles to a lab for testing, just to make sure that the quality has and still a Tidal Bay once it's in those new containers. And
Yeah.
thankfully all those tests have were positive. Everyone was okay. And again, it's
Nice.
just being an innovative region. I think us being as young as we are, and just again the culture of Nova Scotians, they had to the history and the climate and just the sort of where Nova Scotia, in past years, just because of its location is more isolated. They've innovated all their lives, and they've been so resilient that those conversations are relatively easy,
Yeah.
and they time over time they've pulled together, and I think that's what we're seeing translate to the interest of Tidal Bay, is people are seeing that innovation, and it's sort of a nod to the past and the European sort of styles, but it's also very innovative, and yeah, it's pretty fantastic.
What is the average price of a Tidal Bay bottle? Does the winery get to decide that? How does that get decided when you get accepted in each year
Yeah,
to be able to bottle under a Tidal Bay? Do
yeah.
you
So
get to
we
set that? Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, so I'm speaking in Canadian dollars, so it's a lot
Okay,
different.
yeah. Yeah, we'll let everybody figure it out for their own currency. Yeah.
Yeah, it'll sound high in the US, but I'm talking Canadian dollars, and our prices on everything, unfortunately, is a lot higher than in the US. But
Right.
so they sit around $20 to $25. Canada is a unique situation where a lot of our pricing is sort of dictated by provincially. A lot of our provinces sort of own the sales channel. It's our distribution is not privatized. Not in different provinces it is, but Nova Scotia is one of those provinces where a government entity, Nova Scotia Liquor Corporation, is basically our sales channel. And so, we don't have as much flexibility in our pricing as say the US wineries, but it sits Canadian dollars. It sits in the $20 to $25 range.
All right. Well, in today's exchange rate in the US, that's 15 to $19. That's
Correct. Yeah.
very, very reasonable, I
Yeah.
think.
I think so.
Um, yeah. Um, if somebody, let's say a bunch of somebodies who all lived together and made wine in a particular region, let's say Napa or I don't know, an appellation in the Willamette Valley, like the Ribbon
Mhm.
Ridge or something like that, here in the U.S. I'm just thinking of. Um, if they decided this sounds like a really good idea and we should do this for a lot of reasons,
Mhm.
do you have any advice for anybody who wants to join together and emulate and imitate Tidal Bay and what you guys are doing?
Yeah, well, I think you captured it just a few moments ago. Like a lot of our wineries, some excel at sparkling, some, are organic. Like everyone has their specialty and their niche. But I think you can look at every region and identify a grape, whether it's a grape, whether it's like a unique character to your region, and a unique character that's consistent throughout whatever sort of region, geographic region you're looking at, that something that's consistent, and I think like identifying that, recognizing what you do well, and I think that commonality in it. I think that's where you can pull together and start from. Each region is unique, and I think we have to do a better job of celebrating our uniqueness. I think even just a new entrant to the wine industry, you hear a lot about these words like terroir and everything, but what is it about your terroir that makes you unique, and what is it that this region does really well and consistently well, no matter if there's a frost or anything? What do you guys do well every year? And start from there. Something as an executive director coming to this industry, and there's a lot of challenges. We all know there's a lot of challenges when it comes to working in the wine industry, but it's also we got to find those pieces where that we can all work together on, and that's where you start from, and that's that would be my recommendation to any region considering this is focus on what sets your region apart, and something that you can be consistent on, and start to celebrate that, whatever it may be.
Have you heard of any of the sort of hiccups along the way to doing this, to creating Tidal Bay? Like, I guess what I'm looking at, not, I mean, that's great. What you said is great for sure. I guess I was thinking more along the actual structuring of this, and maybe some of the challenges to working together as a group of, individuals to try to do something in partnership and in collaboration that everyone agrees with. Like, have you, and maybe, I mean, that's a huge question. So I guess maybe I'm just asking, were there stories of roadblocks that were run into, or just big disagreements that had to be resolved along the way in doing
Yeah.
this? That
Yeah. Well, I think even just a most recent example is canning Tidal Bay. And I think, there was some wineries that were very much for it, and some wineries that, were possibly a bit more hesitant. And I'm a very data centric person. And so, what my job is to, as an executive director, is to sort of take the data forward. So whether it's consumer research, whether it's quality research, and looking towards sort of respected experts in the field, like a Peter Gamble that a lot of our wineries respect here in Nova Scotia, and pulling all that information together so that our wineries can make informed decisions. So we looked at there was a lot of heated discussions say when it came to possibly canning Tidal Bay, but with science and with data and facts, and when you present that to the wineries and you layer in additional testing, again, we're not going to compromise on quality, and providing those assurances to our wineries, that made it a conversation that people were willing to, and a risk that people were willing to take. But it wasn't an easy path to go down. I wouldn't pretend to say that it wasn't. And but we came to that conclusion within 4 months. I think that's an exceptional speed,
yeah,
to sort of navigate an industry through, and proud of that myself. And again, it's bringing in data and facts, and trying to park personal opinions, and overall, and just a reminder to everyone is when we attend our board meetings or have our discussions, is you park your winery hat at the door and you bring your industry hat and we have to do what's best for the industry. And we're not all perfect by no means, but that's what we all try to do when we have these sensitive conversations. And so far we've been able to pull through, and again, it's at the end of the day, you do what's best for the industry.
and it sounds like it's a self-selecting group of people who are interested in it, because it's not mandatory for everybody in the appellation. It's an elective. If you are within the appellation, you can participate. You don't have to.
Yep.
And so that probably, the people who think it's a good idea, who see the advantages to it, can join, and those who don't have to. And it sounds like you have a little less than maybe, or a little more than 50% participation, it sounds like,
Oh,
from the
yeah.
wineries in Nova Scotia, which is really phenomenal for a region of that size, I think.
Yeah,
Um,
it is. And, when we look at the size too, it's, I'd say it's probably like a sort of volume size. It's, we've got 14, 14 wineries um, making Tidal Bay, but they sort of equate to being about 95% of the volume of the industry. So it really,
okay.
yeah, it really is the
The
large
majority for sure.
majority of the
That's
industry
great.
for sure. And I'm hoping, we're talking to another winery. I'm hoping next year in 2024 we'll see a 15th Tidal Bay. So pretty exciting. And
Nice.
yeah, again, it's proving to be something that's standing out for our region, and yeah, we're very proud of it.
How do you keep the evaluation objective? Like, who does the reviews and judging of each year's submissions of wine?
Yeah, so it's a blind tasting panel.
Okay,
They start in December, and so they do not see the label or who. So they don't see it. They just see the form and just sort of the, the the makeup of the sample that's being submitted,
got it.
and it's a sort of a pre-selected list of individuals. So the wineries don't necessarily know who's on the panel for that year. Not that we try and hide it. It's, but it's a list of individuals that sort of pre-approved. We have two bodies that are consistent year over year. So again, providing that consistency of making sure year over year that panel has some consistency. It's a panel of 5, but it's blind, and wineries have up to 3 submissions um, that they can submit. I haven't seen a winery not not make it past the third, but they have. There are some wineries that we do a monthly, and they start in December, and the last one's in March. And there have been a few that have squeaked through at the end, but that's again, trying to make sure that it's as fair as possible for everyone. But even our December tasting that we just had, we had over 50% that didn't make it. So it's not that it's an easy pass. We take it, the standards seriously, and that was sort of the results of the December tasting.
So when that happens by March, what of that remaining 50% that didn't make it does make it? Like, did they
Yeah,
resubmit then? Like, go back and do some alterations to the wine,
yeah.
or bottle some different blends or things like that?
Yeah, so they can resubmit 3 times, and usually by March, there's maybe just one winery. It's usually a smaller one that is submitting. Usually, December is a tough one because the wine is still so new, and
Yeah, I was gonna
so
say, yeah.
December, yeah. So December is a tough one, and they can actually, resubmit the, pretty much the same blend, and it will pass in January just because the wine has had a bit more time. December is a tough one, but yeah, it's by March. It really is maybe just one winery maybe submitting at that time. January is a good one, and we're actually our next um, panel is this Friday. So
Nice. Do you have to submit at each one? Could you wait till March? Like, if you
yeah,
wanted to, you
you can
could
wait.
just, if you're like, yeah, it's
No,
not ready, there's no way, I gotta wait, kind of
yeah,
thing.
definitely not recommended to wait till March.
Just in case you don't make that one, that's your
Yeah,
last shot.
I haven't
Right.
seen that yet, and I would be, I that would be tough one if you're just
Some of the
submitting.
really cocky producers will be like, oh yeah, I got this.
I got this. But yeah, no, it's usually a second submission that has to be submitted in March.
Nice. Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
this is really interesting. And you mentioned sustainability and organic farming and things like that.
Mhm.
What percentage? I mean, I don't think there's a requirement for Tidal Bay with that,
No.
but I know that Nova Scotia sounds like it's got a pretty decent track record as far as that goes. Do you have any data on who is doing or how many people are certified some form of organic or biodynamic or otherwise?
So we've got Lackady the Lackady Winery that's organic, and we've got um, Lightfoot and Wolfville, Benjamin Bridge. I would say, for Nova Scotia, given the size, I think we're very much forward thinking as far as lower intervention or wines or organic wines, and those three in particular stand out as very forward thinking, and when it comes to organic. And so yeah, those three wineries. I think as far as to, again, innovation overall, our industry is just the culture and the environment that we're in. I think the environment has always been at the forefront of the industry, and just even going and visiting other wineries, not just Lightfoot and Wolfville, Lackady and Benjamin Bridge. There's Grand Pre and a myriad of Luckett. There's that when you walk through their vineyards, they're talking about using less intrusive methods, and just very much, again, when you're embracing the grapes and what does well in your region, I think you can um, you know uh, I think it's easier for your region to adopt more environmentally friendly practices. And again, when we're reaching out to and trying to engage consumers, and especially trying to speak to 20 somethings and 30 somethings, being environmentally aware and conscious of the of your industry. I think that lands well on them. And we have adopted this app with a company by the name of Taste Advisor. And again, it's another tool that our industry has come together to work on. And by downloading this app, the Wines of Nova Scotia app, you can easily select, like, a consumer, if they are looking for organic wines or anything specific. This app, you just search for it, and all those wines will be listed. So again, trying to make sure our region is forward thinking, innovative, but quality, but also making sure we're communicating and engaging, not just 40 somethings like myself, but making sure that we're innovating and engaging consumers in new ways, so that when they have their preferences, whatever it might be, even whites or reds, especially, wine can sometimes be that intimidating to talk about its tools, like our Wines of Nova Scotia app, that have really enabled us to engage consumers in different and unique ways. So hopefully in a long way that answers your question.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. No, I think my only other question is how does one get to Nova Scotia? What's the best way?
Plane. Yeah,
I was hoping sailboat would be.
you can do that too. Absolutely. Sailboat, plane, driving to Nova Scotia is really, really, there's an international airport. There's, direct flights to, I think it's a 2 hour flight to New York, a 2 hour and a half flight maybe to Boston. It's, I think even if people know Toronto quite well, in Canada, it's a direct flight from Toronto to, if that needs to be your first stop, it's another 2 hour flight. It's only, again, we're sort of in the middle of the ocean. It's, I think, a 4.5 direct flight to London, England. And so it really is like uniquely situated in a great spot to for Americans or even Europeans to come to.
Oh, nice. So there's a bridge right from New Brunswick across a little channel. Is that right? Or how
Yeah,
is that? Yeah.
absolutely.
So if you wanted to
Yeah.
drive,
Yeah.
got it. Pretty
Yeah,
accessible.
yeah, yeah. It is. It really is, and it's connected to the mainland Canada. It's not an island, but it is, like, yeah. There's bridges to PEI and
Oh, I
um,
gotcha. I see what
yeah,
you're saying.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's all right.
Yeah, it
And
looks like an island, but I guess, yeah, you're right. It's more like its
yeah,
own little whatever you would call that
peninsula.
peninsula.
Yeah,
It looks too extreme to be a peninsula, I think of, but I guess that's what it is.
we are a bit extreme. No. But yeah, it's, and it's pretty magical. Like when I drive through wine country, of course I'm biased, but I've been very lucky to travel and live in different parts of the world. And every time I drive to the wine valley, and yeah, it's special. And I'm very, very lucky to be able to speak about it and represent the Nova Scotia wine industry.
Well, great. Well, thank you so much for doing that. It's
Yeah,
really exciting to hear about, and I think I love the example that you're setting with Tidal Bay. It's a real special thing, and I hope I can bring a little attention to it as well, because I think it's such a great model for other people to follow in our world out here outside of outside of Europe, where where I think we need a little more Appellation focus. I love
yeah.
it.
Yeah,
It's
it's doing well for us, and it's proud, and we're very proud of it, clearly. And thank you, Adam, for the invite. Really, really appreciate it. And again, the offer is there if you ever want to come and visit. We're happy to host you and your family and friends, and the hospitality and the wine is amazing, and our seafood. So
oh God. I mean, I want to do more than visit. I'd love to
yeah,
just stay, come and never leave. Sounds great.
yeah, we'll figure it out.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Haley. I really appreciate it.
Okay.
Thanks so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. And if you did and would like to support this podcast, please do. There is a Patreon link in the show notes where you can subscribe with a monthly, very low subscription to add monetary support, or please subscribe on your feed, wherever you listen to this podcast. Subscribe and follow this podcast so that you will automatically download it when each new episode comes out. That's one of the few metrics that we can measure to see the support and listenership of this. And otherwise, if you're already listening, subscribe, supporting, whatever, just a long-time listener, haven't done anything, please do a review. If you would, any positive review with 5 stars and a nice word is fantastic and helpful, and really improves the algorithmic performance of this podcast. So thank you so much.